I've come today to Cheltenham Cemetery. The cemetery is a couple of miles outside of Cheltenham at a village called Prestbury. This is a large cemetery and we'll just make our way through and spot anything interesting. Nearby is a building site which is very active today, so you may hear some machinery noises in the background. A very elaborate statue of Christ on the cross, and the inscription at the base is to Eleanor Mary, the wife of John Brennan, 1930, aged 37 years. Close by are 3 war graves. Private B. White, Machine Gun Corps, 1916. Private E.F. McIntosh, Gloucestershire Regiment, 1917. And this is to Private O'Kea, 22nd Battalion, Canadian Infantry, November 1916, aged 24. And here is a war memorial to those that died in the Great War. This doesn't carry the names, it's to memory of the sailors and soldiers who gave their lives for their country in the Great War. This carries a very clear inscription to Elizabeth, the wife of Charles Hancock, 1887, aged 46, and then Charles Hancock, 1898, aged 56, and their youngest daughter beneath that, 1953. A little unusual in that the top part is a metal plaque. Mary Louisa Lovell, 1928, aged 77. And then beneath that, Irene Margaret Lovell, 1945. And then Nora Gladys Lovell, 1964. This is a very wide stone, wide plot. It's got an unusual insignia at the top, a B with 1 flying wing. Sergeant Cyril Reuben Clifford Mann, RAFVR, Volunteer Reserve, husband of Peggy, killed 1945, aged 22. And then we got Cyril Frank Mann, husband of Winifred Ida. On the left we have Winifred Ida, and on the right we have Albert Edward Clifford, the brother of Winifred Ida. Be interesting to know what the insignia at the top is, the B with the 1 flying wing. Further into the graveyard we can see the chapel of rest, or the chapel where the services are held. The angel has the finger pointing towards the sky, and she's mounted on a very large stone pedestal. The inscriptions, however, are not easy to decipher, and I can't get a surname off this one. This is a very tall memorial. I apologise for the 2 yellow barriers, there seems to be some repair work going on in the graveyard. This tall memorial, the inscription is Reverend Andrew Morton Brown, born 1812 at New Milnes in Ayrshire, minister of the Congregational Church in his town, 1843 until he died in 1879, erected by his fellow townsmen as a tribute of respect for his talents, and so on right the way down. Another church minister, Horatio Wilkins, for 17 years the faithful minister of Salem Baptist Church in Cheltenham, and after a long illness he died in 1895. This elaborate one is rather being taken over by the brambles that have been allowed to grow on the plot. The inscription on this side is Annie Herbert, 1887, aged 34. And on the same plot and alongside it are 2 horizontal tombs One covered with brambles and the other one covered with ivy. We can see here why those yellow barriers were up that we noted earlier. A very large branch has come off this ancient yew tree. These yew trees are very slow growers. There's a massive branch fallen on the ground here. Across here, and an inscription, and the lower one reads John Brend Winterbotham, born at Innsbruck 1805, for 30 years, one of the governing body of this town. Looks like he died in 1881, and then beneath that we have his wife who died a year later. Next to it is another Winterbotham. This one is to James Batten Winterbotham. Died at Luxor in Egypt 1914. And all these graves here, the ones inside the railings, the second one inside the railings and the third one, all belong to the Winterbotham family. This one is to William Smart Davis. For many years one of the Cheltenham Improvement Commissioners and assisted in obtaining the first incorporation of the town. Very large horizontal tomb here. Thomas Ferberson. And further down, an unusual first name for his wife, Hedwig Elizabeth, 1830 something, age 56. Up here, close to the Chapel of Rest, all those great and good people of Cheltenham are gathering. This is a more modern one. William Bullingham, master builder, borough councillor, died in 1974. And then Floss, his wife, in 1987. A large, substantial memorial in a sizable plot. It tells us the names and dates, but doesn't tell us anything else about them. William Halings of this town, 1886, age 47. Emma, his wife, 1913. And their third son, Harry Montague. Two more large plots here. The one behind is completely overgrown with sycamore, and the one in front is completely overgrown with brambles. I guess the plots that are walled in with metal railings, they don't tend to clear. They leave that to the owners to clear, and the owners are no longer around. Love the surname, Sophie Louisa Chatters of Strathfield, Cheltenham, and her husband Henry William Chatters. This one to the Reverend William Crispin, ATS, I'm not sure what that is, Baptist minister, 1866 to 1935. And then his wife Miriam Crispin. Under the trees here is a bench, and on the back the plaque reads, erected to the memory of Brian Jones, founder of the Rolling Stones. Another view of the Chapel of Rest. In fact, this one is not in use at the moment because of that very large branch off the yew tree. There is a second one in this graveyard that is being used. Somewhere under here is the grave, and presumably a memorial stone. We'll have to see that another time. When we look this way across the graveyard, we can see in the distance the hills, Cleve Hill, part of the Cotswolds, very beautiful part of the country. An enormous plot here with the railings around it and a very substantial memorial at the far end. It's George Thompson of Cheltenham and of Aberdeenshire. A substantial tomb, and on this one the inscription is cast into the metal, and it's Grace Davidson, for nearly 40 years the beloved and faithful wife of Robert Davidson, Physician General of the Madras Army. She died at Cheltenham 1868, aged 64. To her sacred memory and of that of their only son, John Forbes, who died in Java 1857 in his 27th year. On the end of the tomb they have their coat of arms, and on the other side we remember Robert Davidson himself. Born at Aberdeen 1795, died at Cheltenham 1888 I think. A lot of retired military people came to live in Cheltenham. It was well known for those type of people retiring here, very much sought after. This one commemorates John Edward Clift, CE, civil engineer of Mayfield, Cheltenham, died 1875, aged 58. This stone is full of military people. Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Robert Burton, Commander 94th Russell's Infantry, died on active service 1872-1918. Beneath that we have Lieutenant Colonel Charles William Westbrook Burton, Commandant Madras Infantry. Beneath that their second son, Brigadier General Edmund Bottier Burton, 17th Bengal Cavalry. Beneath that, Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Nuttall Burton, 87th Punjabi, their eldest daughter, and then Lieutenant Colonel Henry Gerard Burton, 12th Punjab Frontier Force Regiment, died 1981. There are also other inscriptions on the horizontal stone beneath. An interesting and unusual effect on this one. We have the dove with the olive leaf in its beak, and beneath it we have the inscription, but it's done with a sort of wavy effect to make it look as though it's on parchment or paper. Charles Edward, fourth son of Joseph and Margaret Shaw, 1861 to 1882, so he was aged 21, and we got some names underneath. But interesting effect with the ripples running down the stone. We have an angel, hands together, looking skyward, and the name beneath is Anne Sweetland Gooding. Something quite grand here, possibly the grandest one in the graveyard. And the name is Thomas Lidford Champion of Maldon Court, Cheltenham, and he was born in 1831 and left this life in 1880 something. Really quite detailed and spectacular. We've got figures on each of the four corners. We've got quite elaborate detail in the carvings coming down. Underneath this tree we have one with a wreath in metal, and it's in memory of Major General Sir Frederick Carrington, KCB, KCMC, second son, born 1844 and died 1913. Dotted throughout the graveyard are these war graves. There are two there, one more, two down there, one, two over there. Everywhere you look, there are these war graves. There's a pair of Royal Air Force graves here, but from different wars. Flying Officer C.G. Hinton, I think. Pilot, Royal Air Force, 1943, age 25. And yet if I just move to the right and on the same plot, Second Lieutenant H.C. Craddock, Royal Air Force, November 1918, age 24. I've moved on 20 yards or so. There's two more war graves there. One in the distance, two more in the distance, one middle distance, one foreground, two more middle distance. So many young lives. So many of the war graves are of young men. This is one of the exceptions. Pioneer J.G. Mitchell, Royal Engineers, 1920, age 64. Obviously a professional soldier, a lifetime soldier. There's a group of war memorial stones here. P.J. Penketh, 1918, 26 years old. H.C. Vale, Australian Pioneers, 1918, age 35. R.W. Resso, Australian Infantry, September 1918, age 25. A.R. Callaghan, Australian Infantry, 1918. W.R.B. Johnson, Australian Army Medical Corps, 1918. W.R. Jerome, Australian Machine Gun Corps. A.W. Stevens, Australian Infantry, 1917. J.H. Fenton, Australian Army Medical Corps. S.G. Turner, Australian Infantry, 1918. And this one's a cross. James Warren, Australian Imperial Forces, 1883-1918. So in fact all the graves in this group are for the Australian soldiers who gave their lives so far from home. We have a figure of the angel here with a hand raised, and the memorial is to Netta Mabel Castledine and Pat Castledine. And if you look at the images, you'll see the insignia of the parachute regiment, and he's wearing his red beret. A modern stone, John Kelly, a real gentleman, and a pair of boxing gloves at the top of the stone. A very elaborate modern grave with a lot of inscription on it, but primarily it commemorates the life of Jake Johnson, who was just aged 19 when he died. There's a picture of the young man there. And further down we've got more pictures. A very well decorated and remembered grave. And when we look at the inscription, we see that it's for James Samuel Johnson, known as Jimmy. And then we have a horse and gypsy wagon. So he was a traveller of some sort, age 62. And this must be one of the largest of the modern gravestones. It's quite enormous. At the back we can see there's some images. Anna Goodwin, Willie Goodwin, and then down the front here We have some more images and some more memorials. Interestingly enough, the one on the right here is sitting on the steps of a caravan. So I'm wondering if this is not one of the travellers' showground graves. They do tend to go for very elaborate memorials. Another extremely elaborate grave. Surname is Hayward, and on the left I see Joan, devoted wife, mother, nan and great nan. There's a space on the right, so I'm expecting they're waiting for him to depart this life and he'll go on the right hand side. 4 names down there, possibly their children: Joan, Anthony, Michael, Carol. On the front there's various inscriptions, but only on the left hand side. There's a new grave here without the final memorial stone, but they've put up a large picture of the lady concerned. Joan Shaw Taylor has those wonderful words from Dylan Thomas: "Rage, rage against the dying of the light." He wrote those words when he was watching his father dying. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. This area is very full of the elaborate gravestones. They seem to be concentrated just in this particular garden area. This one is just one amazing slab of polished marble. It is enormous, beautifully finished, but there's not a word of inscription on this grave at the present time. This one's to Les Gardner, age 55, and he's wearing the colours of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, so he must have been a good man. Well, I'm right up in the very newest part of the graveyard now. There are a lot of cars over there, so I think a funeral is taking place at the moment. A lot of these new stones are in black with gold writing, heart shapes. And up here we have an area for the children's graves. So many of them. Well, Cheltenham Cemetery is a very large place. There's a lot of interest, both from the old graves and some of these rather elaborate modern graves. You could spend a day here just wandering amongst the memorials and always find something of interest. You should certainly put it on your list, although it's a little way outside the town of Cheltenham, a place called Prestbury, but I can only recommend it. Do come and see it. Till the next time.